Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. When I was walking around, I saw some of the folks from the local chamber, so I just want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to Woodstock and to Ingersoll, the Tillsonburg Chamber, and the Norwich Chamber. It's always nice to connect with folks from the Chamber Network as I'm out in the communities. Just to add to the introduction about the Chamber's network, through the local chambers, there's about 60,000 businesses that are members of the Chamber Network across Ontario. And those businesses employ approximately 2 million people, and they contribute about 17% to the province's GDP. So it's quite a formidable network, and what I'd like to say is that every chamber and every business at the local level, we're all interconnected, because much of the information that I'm going to talk about today in Emerging Stronger does come from local communities across Ontario. Because what we do is we have an annual general meeting, we have consultation sessions, and through these sessions, the chambers send to us what they hear from the local businesses, and then we sit down and we distill all that information. There's actually a whole voting process that we go through at our AGM, and we come up with resolutions, and we decide which resolutions that the Ontario Chamber is going to work on. And then what you see in the product here, much of that information is reflected in what's in our new Emerging Stronger document that we just launched, by the way, on Tuesday. So this is fresh off the presses. I think it's the first community outside of Toronto where we launched the event that we're actually speaking about our Emerging Stronger document. So, having walked around, I want to take this opportunity just to say this. You have a great lineup of organizations. So, terrific, Peter, for putting this together. Each and every one of those organizations contributes to the fabric of your community, whether they're providing community and social services, whether they're supporting tourism, whether they're providing education, whether it's business and economic activity that they're involved in, whether they're providing stewardship to the environment or local government. By building a sustainable and vibrant community, it's all about collaboration. It's about bringing together various sectors in your community and rallying them around a shared vision. That will help inform current and future decision making. It will improve the quality of life and spur economic growth. The plan that you have developed will no doubt act as a lens or a roadmap that will help you achieve your common goals. The Emerging Stronger initiative is similar in that nature. When we launched Emerging Stronger series in 2012, our vision at the time, and it is the same now, to provide government and business with an economic roadmap that will equip us with the enablers necessary to navigate an increasingly volatile global economy. Emerging Stronger turned out to be a rallying cry for cities, post-secondary institutions, businesses, and not-for-profits. Together, we've accomplished a lot. For example, Ontario remains the North American leader in attracting foreign capital investment. We've helped spur unprecedented infrastructure commitments. Our advocacy has led to the creation of Ontario's recently announced Business Growth Initiative, which will address the rising cost of doing business in Ontario. And we've helped design training and immigration systems that are more responsive to employer needs across the province. But more needs to be done as we face the challenges of a changing global economy. Our dollar and our interest rate are at near historic lows. This provides business with opportunities to invest, to export, and to take greater advantage of our diversity. It's with this optimism that we developed our final Emerging Stronger policy platform. It is here that we identify actionable items that will enable Ontario to better compete and thrive in a global economy. For example, we are increasingly convinced that Ontario's ability to succeed is in part tied to the ability to help SMEs, that's small and medium-sized enterprises, become export-ready and scalable. We need to learn from those countries that successfully develop their startups. In an era of competition for foreign investment, this is one area we can be the masters of our own destiny. So why SMEs? Well, a recent Stats Canada report estimates that SMEs with less than 500 employees account for 54% of Canada's GDP. This contribution increases depending on the industry. For example, the agriculture industry, construction, health and accommodation industries have even larger shares of GDP among SME businesses. The authors of the TD Economic Report, using U.S. data, estimated that SMEs contribute to just under half of all total employment, just under half of all total employment. So typically, SMEs serve a specialty or a niche market. They can at times be more flexible in production processes and can play a significant role in job creation during economic recovery. They often also contribute to supply chains that stretch beyond local economies and into international markets. So when we're looking at what we can all do together, sometimes we all look to government, but government can't do it alone. The onus is also on Ontario business leaders to step up. One way they can do this is by addressing the growing disconnect between employers and recent grads. This disconnect is contributing to our skills gap. That's why we at the Ontario Chamber and local chambers as well have partnered with Ryerson University on the Magnet Initiative. It's an online platform which is helping bridge the divide by connecting people with jobs and jobs with people. It's an example of public and private partnership that is working. Now, I want to repeat again, the low Canadian dollars does provide some excellent export opportunities for industries in certain sectors. Yet far too few of our businesses, especially our SMEs, are primed for that opportunity. That's why at the Chamber years ago, we started a little program called Export Market Access that eventually morphed into something called Global Growth. And what that program does is it helps companies access foreign markets. I'll talk a little bit about it later, a little more about it later. But that's why we need governments to prioritize trade-enabling infrastructure, because together we must look to new market opportunities. We have a historic opportunity to build on the strengths Ontario has always had in healthcare, in innovation, and in manufacturing. We need to show real leadership in those areas while investing in our greatest resource, and that is our people, our talent. One thing we know about the economy is that it's cyclical. And just as we conclude this 5-year policy platform, we are again asking ourselves, how can we make this economy even stronger? We need to have the confidence to invest in our communities in a strategic and in a measured approach. The Emerging Stronger series is a culmination of work that we've accomplished together. The recommendations we have made are reflections of what we've heard from you through the Economic Summit and through the thousands of conversations that we have led. Emerging Stronger belongs to everyone. It belongs to everyone in this room. It has been our collective ambition. The bottom line is this: our economic recovery is not assured. That is why we must work collectively towards a renewed economic agenda for our province, just like you are doing here in Oxford County, and a strategic plan that ensures Ontario can continue to discover its full potential. So at this point, if I don't mess up the slides, okay, because I'm very bad at this. Oh, there we go. At this point, I would like to talk briefly about the 5 pillars in Emerging Stronger, but I'm only going to highlight some of the information in those pillars because, I'm cognizant of the time constraints that we have and some of the recommendations under each of those pillars. The first pillar is fostering a culture of innovation and smart risk-taking. In a global economy, central to being successful is being innovative and ranking high on the productivity scale. We need to help create an environment that unlocks capital and increases investment in the determinants of productivity. We should also allow ourselves to fail, because you see, failing sometimes helps drive productivity. If no one's taking a risk, how do we hope to create something innovative? There are more failures out there than there are successes, but you learn from each failure, and each failure brings you along that continuum to the end, which is success in what you're trying to achieve. So we can't, the expression goes, eat our young, right? We have to allow people from time to fail. The environment should nurture smart risk-taking, because as we continue to produce goods and services in a way that was successful yesterday may not be successful tomorrow, because the rest of the world isn't standing still. So we need to adopt a better regulatory approach that conducts economic impact analysis prior to development stage of policy changes. This better regulation approach ensures that regulations are informed by best available evidence. Ontario's new business growth initiative holds promise. If implemented and enforced government-wide, the initiative could facilitate the creation of proportional, targeted, and evidence-based regulation. We are calling for the restoration of the scientific research and experimental development tax credit to 20%, the SR&ED. In 2014, the 20% investment tax credit for SR&ED qualified expenditures was reduced to 15%. This reduced SR&ED claims by about $500 million across Canada, and Ontario accounts for nearly half of business R&D spending in Canada. So we're asking for that 20% rate to be reinstituted so that we can better support innovation and productivity growth. We can help SMEs and startups achieve scaling, because we have a bit of a problem here. We're very, very good at incubating, and we get companies, the SMEs, to a certain point. But it's that point where they're going to grow beyond that 50 to 300, 400, 500, there is a gap. So we need to be mindful of that gap and bring in policies and programs that will help those companies scale up from the smaller version to the larger, medium-sized companies that we're trying to develop. So Ontario businesses struggle to access procurement opportunities. Public procurement is one of the primary tools which governments can have a material impact on the growth of SMEs and startups. Other jurisdictions, such as the United States, have earmarked small percentages of public budgets to innovative SMEs through competitive bids, with the goal of providing early-stage financial support to innovative firms with commercial promise. The next pillar is building a 21st century workforce. Ontario continues to suffer from the skills gap or skills mismatch. In a recent survey conducted by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, roughly 30% of businesses reported they could not fill a job over a 12-month period because they couldn't find someone with the right qualifications. So think about that. They couldn't find something with the right qualifications, even though we have one of the highest levels of post-secondary education in the world. We still can't connect properly businesses to the talent that they need. Now, that connection isn't across the entire province. The shortage tends to be either sector-specific or regional-specific. The most affected sectors include transportation and infrastructure, wholesale trade, and manufacturing. So we must find better ways to leverage the talents and skills of all groups in our society, and that includes Aboriginal communities and persons with a disability. The government and business must also leverage immigration systems to fill gaps not being filled through local talent. For a variety of reasons, employers are not tapping into international talent. Meanwhile, too few employers are using the new express entry system that aims to provide them with quick access to highly skilled talent. The temporary foreign worker program should be accessible, and that incentives should be put in place that help employers make greater use of the express entry system. We must foster greater connections between graduates and employers. And again, this is all about creating collaborative communities, linking business, not-for-profit, academic institutions, municipalities together to that common shared vision. Ontario faces a labor market paradox. It's experiencing skills deficit in the labor market shortages in key sectors. At the same time, unemployment and underemployment remain relatively high. Part of the problem lies in a disconnect between graduates as well as underrepresented groups in the labor market, such as persons with disabilities and employers. There are successful programs out there. I mentioned the Magnet Project as one. There are other successful programs out there to help bridge that gap. But it's incumbent on employers to tap into those programs, because without the jobs going into the systems, the matches can't be made and those programs can't be successful. So we urge employers to take advantage of those programs out there that help them connect to talent. Okay, the next area, the next pillar, is restoring fiscal balance. We have been a strong advocate for government to adopt new service delivery models to leverage private sector expertise as a way to reduce expenditures. So we can lighten the fiscal burden on municipalities while avoiding measures that would drive up costs of doing business if we take a look and reform the interest arbitration system in the province, so that arbitrator decisions will truly reflect a municipality's economic and fiscal environment. We can reform Ontario tendering rules in order to create a level playing field for construction companies when competing for public contracts. Currently, municipalities are treated as businesses under the Labor Relations Act, and as a result, many municipalities have been forced to restrict tendering, resulting in higher costs for taxpayer-funded construction projects. We can also ensure that the provincial budget is balanced by 2017-18, which is a commitment that has been made by the current government. The next pillar is taking advantage of new opportunities in the global economy. While 50% of Ontario businesses view China as one of our most important trade destinations, only about 1% of exports are destined for that country. So there's a mismatch between what we believe and what is actually happening. Our trade, we probably trade roughly in the neighborhood of between 75 to 78% of all our goods go to the U.S., which is terrific. And they will always be our major trading partner. They're so close, common culture, common language. You know, we share all kinds of research and development opportunities. That will always be the case. But in a global economy, it's important to diversify. So we do need to make that leap to other jurisdictions, to emerging economies, because the amount of opportunity in those economies is tremendous. Okay, you know, I mentioned China earlier. One city in China is larger than our entire country population-wise. So think about the opportunities there if we can tap into that market, if we can sell our goods and services into that market, if we can have the productivity that we need and be innovative because we access the talent that our businesses require to stay ahead of that curve, we can be extremely competitive in the global economy and tap into those emerging economies. So we need to build on some successes. I said earlier, you know, the Global Growth Fund at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce has helped a number of companies to date. We have helped over 1,300 companies access foreign markets. Okay, in the report it talks about in the last 2 years about 423 companies that have reported generated $89 million in new export sales. The reality is that the program in totality, because we only went back 2 years for the report, the companies that we've supported have generated over $265 million in brand new export sales. So there are opportunities there for small business. This is what we're talking about, smart risk taking. So if any folks in the room have small businesses that are looking to export, please contact your local chambers or contact us at the Ontario Chamber. We have a nice little fund there. It'll provide up to $30,000 per application to help companies access those global markets. Okay, and there is a reporting process in that we will help you through, and we'll also help you through the grant application process. Okay, we need, we've heard a lot as well about infrastructure spending recently. So what we're advocating is this, that infrastructure spending should be invested in trade-enabling infrastructure. We encourage the federal government to invest those funds in that trade-enabling infrastructure, the kind that will help businesses access foreign markets. This includes public assets such as airports, ports, and roads, which play a critical role in getting Ontario goods and services to market. So what we're saying is, good on the infrastructure spending, but let's spend it strategically. Let's help our companies access those global markets with the infrastructure that we're putting into play. On the tourism side, we should build on Ontario's tourism strategy. Ontario's tourism industry generates approximately $22 billion in receipts every year and employs nearly 200,000 Ontarians. So we're calling on the federal government to reinstate some of the funding that was taken away from the Canadian Tourism Commission. Because what propels people to come to Canada, to Ontario? It's the brand. It's the story of the Canadian brand. So we would like to see the Ontario and Canada marketed in a fuller way to draw more and more tourists to Ontario. And again, I just want to mention the low dollar again. And with the low dollar, this is a great opportunity and a good marketing opportunity to bring more tourists to Ontario to grow that tourism business. Just going back to the trade side a little bit, you folks have heard of the trade agreement with Europe, the CETA agreement. What we're calling on is the elimination of interprovincial trade barriers before that agreement comes into effect. Because that agreement will reduce tariffs between Canada and the EU, and without the elimination of some interprovincial trade barriers, CETA could provide Europeans bidding on Canadian contracts with an industrial edge over our companies looking to win similar contracts in other provinces. So we need to eliminate those interprovincial trade barriers before the CETA agreement actually comes into force. The next one, and the last pillar, is identifying, championing, and strategically investing in our competitive advantages in the global economy. We have advantages that are the envy around the world: a highly educated workforce, abundant resources, a high quality of life. What got us here, though, won't necessarily keep us here. We need to increase the linkages between the private sector, not-for-profits, government, labor, and the academic community to share knowledge and ideas. We actually need to stop being so modest. We need to shout about all the successes and the great things that our companies and that our communities are producing around the world to take advantage, and we need to take advantage of our diversity. We need to bring the best and the brightest to Ontario to complement our own labor force. So we should take a look at developing standards for the availability and access of broadband internet. Currently, there's no standards that exist that regulate the availability and access to high-speed internet. The U.S. recently classified the internet as a utility in recognition the internet plays in local economic development. We are calling for broadband internet to be available to all communities across Ontario. And lastly, under this pillar, we'd like to see an increased promotion of Ontario's agri-food sector at home and abroad. Through the Premier's Challenge in 2013, the agri-food sector has added $1.3 billion in GDP and over 34,000 jobs. We're asking for a renewed effort in this area to promote the industry through future trade missions to emerging markets. The global food demand is expected to double over the next 30 years, and Ontario must be well positioned to meet this demand. So that's really the essence of our Emerging Stronger document. In closing, I would like to note there's a complementary nature between your sustainability plan and the Emerging Stronger document. One creates a vision for your region that sets out a collective ambition, and another sets out a collective ambition for the province. Both were developed through extensive consultation with stakeholders. Both seek to build a sustainable future and to help us better compete in the global economy. There is no doubt that by working together and increasing the collaborative nature of our communities, that we will indeed emerge stronger. Thank Thank you.